everything that happened to me in combat hit me. And in 2018, I had a mental breakdown. Uh, this is when the bad time for me was. I didn't have the army to fall back on. I wouldn't talk to nobody. I isolated. I kept all the pain that I was suffering into myself. Sometimes it did show when I was at work. Um, I would have panic attacks, anxiety attacks, uh, but I didn't realize that's what they were. I didn't know what was going on mentally with me.
Welcome to The Lasting Mission, a podcast dedicated to sharing the powerful stories and experiences of veterans, their families, and supporters. Presented by Mission Roll Call, a nonpartisan movement providing veterans with a powerful, unified voice that is heard by our nation's leaders and communities. For information, visit missionrollcall.org.
Well, hello, I'm Britt Myers, today's host of the Lasting Mission podcast, where we have the privilege of hearing from veterans, their families, and veteran leaders about their stories and experiences. And today I'm so honored to be here with my friend and somebody I've known for a few years now, Ty Buras, who spent nearly 30 years, you ended, I think, at 29 years in the U.S. military as part of the Army. So thank you so much, Ty, for joining us today.
Oh, not a problem.
Well, it might be a little hard to think back 30 years ago, 3 decades, but if you could go back into the position of Ty as a teen or young 20-year-old, talk to me about what inspired you to join the military, which I think happened in the 80s. Is that right?
Yeah, it was 87 when I joined.
What inspired you to join?
Well, to be honest, one of the things was just to get out of the house, but the big thing was I wanted to serve, be part of something.
Yeah, what part of the country are you from?
I'm from Iowa, Midwest.
Okay, so you didn't want to be in the farming industry. You were like, we got to get out of here.
Pretty much, yeah.
And
but also the biggest thing was, not the biggest thing, but one of the things was the college education part.
Did you want to be able to go back to college but have it funded through the military?
Yes.
You mean? Okay.
The GI Bill was a big plus.
Yeah, it definitely is a huge benefit. And did you end up going back to college at some point?
When I retired, I tried to go back a little bit. I didn't finish, but I went back after I retired.
Yeah, life has a way of taking you on these twists and turns, right?
It does.
Can't imagine. Well, you had told me before you really spent the early part of your career in Germany, and this is during the Cold War era. So you had said that things were a little tense, but walk me through that experience of moving to Germany. You're still pretty young. What was that like for you?
Well, at first, when I first got there, one of the first things they do is take you to what's called the dip. A dip is a die in place.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was the folded gap. Like I said, it was the Cold War. So the life expectancy of an infantry grunt was 11 seconds. And you would, when you got alerted, you would roll out to your dip and wait for the enemy to come through and do your best. So that was my introduction to Germany. And as a young guy, that's kind of scary, but also, you're with your brothers and sisters and stuff like that, so it wasn't too bad.
I mean, it's still, like you said, it has to be shocking. You're like, I've never heard of this before, and it's die in place. They couldn't think of another name.
Yep. Nope, that's I know. It's supposed to make you understand the gravity of the situation. It's supposed to make you understand that all your training that you're doing is for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's very important that you take it seriously.
Yeah, well, that'll do it. I mean, that's an effective way to get you to take things seriously. But did you enjoy your experience over there as much as you...
For the most part. I mean, you got to remember, it's the Army. You have your ups and your downs, but my time in Germany was awesome. For the most part, you get to see a country you've never been to or even think about. going to, and you get to see all the sites. I went all over Europe. I went to France. I went to Spain. I went to all over. So it was overall it was a good experience until we got deployed for Desert Storm.
Right. So yes, we need to get to that point. So you were up though for a re-enlistment date, weren't you? Because I think you originally said that was kind of around the time you were like, I wonder if I'm gonna like stay in the military. Was that when you
It
were?
was.
Okay.
It was at the end of my 4-year stint uh, on active duty, and I had like 6 months left, and they extended me just for like a month or two because afterwards, because we came back in July, I think it was in '91. So they had to extend us for a little bit longer to meet that obligation.
Okay. And that's about the time where you see the president go on TV and talk about us going, as part of Desert Storm into Saudi Arabia. But how were you feeling then? You weren't scared.
Uh, for a grunt, uh, it was, let's say, late '90, and the president came on and he said all the units that were getting deployed, and I was in Grafenwehr, and that's the training area in Germany. So we were, just doing our normal training, and this came on, and it went through the barracks like none other. I mean, we were all excited. We were, scared, but as a grunt, you wanted, and it's sad to say, but I mean, you want to do your job. Put it to use like you've been training. And so we were excited, and you get pumped up for it.
Yeah. So you guys were, like you'd said before, you're kind of hooting and hollering. You're like, this is it, we're going. And
Yep.
fear, maybe in the way that you would think, hadn't took hold yet. I mean, you're scared, but it wasn't quite an overwhelming thing of you're like, oh gosh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go.
As a soldier, though, you put that fear in because you have to do your job. First and foremost, you have to do your job, because if you don't do your job, somebody's going to die. So you got to make sure you are serious, and you take that fear and you stuff it away. You don't want to be totally fearless, but you want that fear to be in the background and just keep you alert. Stay alert, stay alive.
Mm-hmm. And what unit did you serve with? Tell me a little bit more about your group.
3rd Armored Division, 1st Brigade, 5.5 Cav.
Okay, it's a lot of words.
Yeah,
I know the 3rd Armored Division. I knew that. And you were probably part of that first wave that went over to Saudi Arabia. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Well, tell me about that. You're at Desert Storm. I know that's when it was really, I think, a big shock. And like you had said, you were in Germany. There was the reality of what you had signed up for, right? You have the dip and you are kind of like, oh, geez, like you're not in the United States anymore, in this totally different environment. But Desert Storm was ramped up even more. So tell me more about that when you got there.
Well, we left. It was like late December, and it was snowing in Germany. And then we flew into Saudi, and it was like 105 outside. So it was like from night to day. It was just unbelievable. But when we first got there, they sent us to was called Cement City, and that's where we staged at first. We had to wait for our vehicles to come in from shore. So we were in Cement City. We were training. We were doing road marches in the desert. We were getting acclimated. But when our vehicles showed up, things started getting more serious, because that's about the time they were shooting Scuds overhead. I remember this one time that really put the fear in me. We were all scared about chemical warfare. That was the big one. That chemical warfare was the scariest thing that we could face. And the Scuds were going overhead, and I was in my track vehicle. And when the alarm sounded off, you got to get out, put your mask on, put your mop suit on, which is a protective garment over your normal clothes. It's filled with charcoal to protect you from chemicals. So I jumped out of my vehicle, put my mask on, put my mop suit on, and I stepped in a puddle of water, and it scared me because it was liquid, and if you got liquid on your mop suit, the chemicals can go through your mop suit, so it scared the heck out of me.
Yeah.
So, and also I thought I pissed myself too.
You're like, great, double whammy.
Yeah, exactly. But it was fine. The scuds went off, and a couple of them did land some places, but not near us. So, but that was my first introduction to combat.
Jeez. And so like I feel like if you've never deployed and I never served, how do you paint that picture for people? Like where are you sleeping? Where are you eating? And like what's happening? Because it's not like, everybody shuts everything down from like, oh, you're awake. So from 9 to 9 we'll be real peaceful and gentle. And then while you go to sleep, that's when we'll do all of our dangerous stuff. Like stuff is happening all the time that you're there, right?
Yeah.
How are you able to like eat and do anything?
Well, we had MREs, meals ready to explode, and just kidding. But we had MREs, but we did have when we were in Saudi, we had hot meals. And when we moved forward to our forward operating base, then we started getting less hot meals. They would send us, they would sea rats basically, and they're canned rations and things like that. So, but the longer you were out, the less comfort food you got. So you had to deal with just the MREs. And it's not like these days where there's like 30 different variations on MREs. No, it was like 12 and that was it.
Oh, was there one that was more digestible than the others that you're like, thank God?
Spaghetti.
Spaghetti?
Yep, spaghetti.
What
we would do was spaghetti would come with this cheese packet. So we were in a vehicle and the exhaust gets really hot. So we take the cheese packet, pour it into the spaghetti, rehydrate a beef patty, put it in there, and you got spaghetti and meatballs. That's about the closest thing you got.
I guess that is a tough one to mess up, but I just can't imagine like packaged cheese just really hitting home for me.
Well, and you got to remember, back then it was pretty bland, but nowadays they got like jalapeno cheese, they got different kinds of cheeses, gluten free. I mean, it's a lot different now.
Yeah, maybe a little better.
Yes.
Fair to say.
Yes.
Other than the scuds, like how I guess the word is like obvious was it that you were in a war zone now? What else were you seeing or experiencing?
We were starting to get issued ammunition. Now, when you're training, you get ammunition just for like ranges and stuff like that. We were not even close to a range. We were in Saudi and we were starting to get issued claymores, M60 rounds, 16 rounds, you name it, we were getting it. And that really lets you know that this is real.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no more training. This is the real thing.
Yep.
Were you guys able to lean on each other, or how were you doing like mentally and emotionally at that point?
It was a nervous excitement. Everybody knew what was coming. It was going to happen no matter what, and we knew it was going to happen. So, basically we just shot the shit with each other. I don't know if I could say that, but shot the shit with each other. We kept each other laughing, having fun, playing football in our mop suits and masks. And we did all kinds of different things, and also the chain of command kept us busy, like doing road marches in the desert, playing, getting acclimated to mop suits, things like that. So, you stayed busy.
Yeah. So you weren't really sitting around thinking about it, talking about it. You're just
Absolutely.
Okay. What was like the gist of your mission and the work that you were doing while you were there?
Well, we were grunts, so I was in a 113, and our mission was to support our headquarters element, which was basically pulling security for them as we moved out. So I was in, like I said, 113, and we were pulling security. And later on, we started clearing bunkers and things like that.
Okay. So things are ramping up then at that point.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And that was So after you were in Desert Storm, how long did you end up staying over there?
When Desert Storm ended, we stayed until, because I think it was around April, May it ended. We stayed until, I'd say, July.
Okay. So in total, were you there?
About 6 months to 7 months,
Okay. Long enough.
long enough.
Yeah. And then did you know where you were going to go after Desert Storm or what the next step was for you in terms of your military career?
Absolutely. I knew that I was going to leave the Army and go to college and do this and that. I had big plans for after the Army. Most soldiers do. Once you get done with the ETS, you pretty much say FTA, and you know what that means.
Yeah.
That's the Army, But for me, it was just like I did my time. I served in combat. It's time to move on.
Mhm.
So I ETS, and I was ready to go full tilt college and this and that. But life had a different thing planned for me.
Yeah. What? What was it?
Well, I got a job at an ammunition plant, and then somebody recommended that I finish my 4 year inactive time in the reserves. So I joined the reserves, and that changed my whole attitude towards the Army.
Mhm.
Before I was, I was gung ho civilian. I was going to go to college, this and that. But then when I joined the reserves, it changed my life. The Army Reserves really did change my life because, I was drinking a lot. I was trying to mask things. I was, in bad places. But when I joined the reserves, it gave me a sense of belonging. It gave me something to strive for because when I got out of active duty, I was a specialist, and I didn't want to go any further. But when I joined the reserves, it gave me the motivation to move forward in my career, and I'm thankful for the Army Reserves for what they've done for me.
Yeah, and it sounds like you had really kind of pulled yourself up by your bootstraps to get through a pretty dark period during that transition. And like you had said,
Absolutely.
yeah, were you able to just rely on your wife, or what help did you have to get to the point where you got to the reserves?
Well, about that time is when we met each other, about 92, 93. So we were just young in our relationship. So I was more focused on work and partying
Mhm.
and the reserves.
Okay, that's a lot on its own.
Yeah.
Keeps you busy enough. So, okay, you joined the reserves, and then is that when you started working up? You became the platoon sergeant. Is that right?
It took a little bit longer, but I was a squad leader. Then I was a section sergeant, and then later on, when I went active duty, active reserves, that's when I went and was a platoon sergeant.
Okay,
I
and so
started off as a staff sergeant, as a platoon sergeant, but then I got promoted to sergeant first class, and that's when I took over as platoon sergeant.
got it. Okay, and you were stateside that whole time, right? You didn't
Yes,
deploy or anything. Okay.
yes. No, we went on our annual trainings. We went to NTC. We went to McAllister. Uh, we yeah, that pretty much stateside. Yeah.
Do you feel like it helped give you that sense of purpose again, where you had these guys and you were in more of a leadership position and able to mentor them? Or what do you think it was about that experience that felt so different from when you first joined the Army?
When I was active duty, I had some bad experiences with some bad leaders, and I told myself I would never be that way, and I would change my leadership style to fit wherever I was and be the best leader I could be. And that motivated me the rest of my career because I knew as a leader, I would at some point probably take soldiers to combat. And when I did that, I needed to be the best I could be. And so I made sure I did everything possible to train up my guys to make sure they had realistic training and they understood that, it's this is not just a 1 weekend a month kind of job. This could be life or death at some point, and you need to treat it that way.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably pretty telling in how they responded to you too. And
Absolutely.
inevitably that did happen, right? So then you deploy again for Operation Iraqi Freedom. Was that the next thing?
Yep. And when I went active duty, we did. Excuse me. Sorry.
Hmm.
We did multiple annual trainings. We went to Guatemala, Honduras. We went to California. We did all different kinds of things, and it was pretty nice. It really did. All that training the Army Reserve puts on does help those troops be better, better leaders, better soldiers, everything, and also better people. Because they had civilian jobs. So I mean, it really does help out. And so, what was the question again?
About then you went to OIF.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Okay. So later on, we got the word. 2003, I think it was, that everything kicked off, and uh, that first year, we didn't think we were going to get called up, but then all of a sudden, we got the word. And for me, being in combat before, that kind of jump started me into, uh, all right, we're going to combat. Train up your soldiers, make sure they're ready. So, and that's where my nickname comes in. They call me Gun. They called me Gunny because I act like a Marine Corps gunnery sergeant. Because I was on them. I made them take apart weapons multiple times, blindfolded. I trained out there, used explosives to make it more realistic for them. I mean, I wanted them ready. And when they got there, I wanted them to be prepared for the worst case scenario.
Yeah, and really doing some of what probably you hadn't had when you came over. Like you said, you were
Right.
completely unaware of what it was going to be.
Any leader that has been in for numerous for time, they take leadership traits from different people they've had in their chain of command, and they build it on and take it and build their own leadership style. And that's what I did. I took the best and the worst from my former leaders, and I tried to make that my, I guess you could say, uh, my method would be take that and be the best leader I can be for my troops.
Mm-hmm.
My goal was if we started off with 42 people are coming home.
Yeah, that's powerful, Ty. And I think what's really cool about your story too is that we sometimes have the honor of talking to post 9/11 vets, or we talk to pre 9/11 vets. And you had experience on both ends of that coin where you were part of Desert Storm, then you come back, and then 9/11 happens, which we sort of skipped over that. But what was happening for you? Where were you on September 11th?
I was actually in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I was doing what's called a USR. It's basically every quarter you go up there, tell them the status of your unit, personnel, who's ready to go, and things like that. And so we were up at our headquarters in Cedar Rapids, and all of a sudden we heard the radio go off, and we thought it was like kind of War of the Worlds. You just don't realize, when it's real or not. And so we were just kind of messing around, and we're doing our report, and then somebody come running in saying, "This is real. They're flying planes into the towers." And at that point, USR didn't matter. We stopped our report. Me and my buddy got into our army vehicle, and we drove as fast as we could back to our reserve centers. We started going into mobilization mode. That means call all your troops, let them know, stay alert, stay alive, be ready for a call if we ever get the call.
Yeah, so you just got straight to work.
Yep, that's what you do, especially when you're on active duty. And when you're AGR, your whole purpose in life is to get that reserve unit ready for combat. That's the whole thing. You make sure when they come in on drill weekends that you have training set up, you have logistics set up, you're getting those people ready for combat. So my job was when I got back to the reserve center, put up, make sure we had enough roadblocks, make sure we had security around the building. We had a person come in on duty and stand guard, things like that.
Yeah, I think that was probably really beneficial in ways you probably didn't even understand at that point for some of the younger people you were serving with, because you had
Yeah.
already been in a war zone and they had not, most of them most likely. And so do you feel like that helped prepare them too and yourself to get back into?
Oh, absolutely. You know, when you have somebody that has combat experience, when I was overseas, we had a couple Vietnam vets. They were up in the rank, sergeant first class, first sergeant, things like that. They were, our go-tos. They knew. So I was that same way with our troops. I was the guy that's been to combat. How was it? What do you do, Sergeant Burris? What do you do? And you try to make sure these guys are ready, not just physically, but mentally ready for combat. And sometimes that's really hard to do.
Oh my gosh, yeah, because until you're there, you don't know. You don't know how you'll
Exactly.
react. Yeah. Did that
You
bring up?
don't know what's going to happen until you're in that combat situation.
Yeah, you can't. Did that bring up anything for you that you had done such a good job of pushing down some of these experiences? And like you had said, you had been at one time like drinking and then you'd kind of gone away from that. But how were you, like, from your mental health perspective, knowing you're going back into a war zone again?
It's like a switch.
Mm.
You can ask my wife anytime. She would tell you it was like a switch came on. All of a sudden, bam! I was like, all right, we got to do this, 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 and this. Get ready for that. And so I wanted to make sure my troops knew I wasn't scared. Which you're always scared when you put it down, but you have to portray that you know what you're doing, that you're not scared, and you'll do anything for them to make sure they get home.
Yeah. Yeah. Service before self, right?
Yep, absolutely.
hmm Well, we have our COO on our team here is an Army veteran, and when I first told him about your story, he was like, "Log base, is it sites?"
Sites.
That he knew Mortaritaville, as it's
Yep.
otherwise called. So tell me about that. You get over to Iraq, and then you're at this. Is it a forward operating base or what is
Yeah, it was a forward operating base. Bob sites.
it? Mm.
Uh, what happened was we got there to Saudi and Iraq, and we got told that we were going to run a fuel farm up in by Victory, which is up by Baghdad. So we were going to go up there, run a fuel farm, run supplies, things like that. So uh, we heard a little bit about log based sites. We didn't know a whole lot, but when we showed up there, we learned real quick this place was not a joke. Uh, Mortaritaville, I'd say 95% of the time we were there, we got some kind of incoming mortars on a daily basis. I mean, we got mortars all the time. And at first, when we first get there, everybody's got shell shock. And it's like, you could tell the guys that have been there for a while and the guys who just got there. I think it was the 1544th transportation. They've been there for a little bit. So, they were getting used to the mortars and, yeah, we're getting hit. So let's go ahead and get to the blah, blah, blah and take cover. When you first get there and you're new to this, especially those guys that haven't been in combat, and you hear that first round blow up, pucker factor, pucker factor goes up to 100, and you're scared crapless. And my job was to show them that, look, it's okay. I had to make sure they looked at me and I was not freaking out. And we had couple people that were leaders that were freaking out, because it's not an easy thing to adjust to.
No.
But after time, everybody gets kind of used to it. You can't get 100% used to it, because if you get 100% used to it, something happens. You have to, once again, stay alert, stay alive. So you get used to it, but you always keep that fear there so you can, make sure you're ready for it. And at log based sites, that was on a daily basis. You didn't travel in packs. You went on convoys. You kept your distance. You always knew where you were, where's the next bunker at, so you can get underneath there and things like that. But one of the things that really woke us up was we got hit one day, and inside this warehouse we had a tent. That was our headquarters for my platoon. And me and a couple guys were sitting around, and all of a sudden we hear the explosions. Now, some of us went and dropped to the ground. Some of us just like, oh crap, and just kind of looked around. Come to find out, there was a round that landed right outside our door, and it peppered the door, and shrapnel was coming inside the building. Not one bit of shrapnel hit our tent, which is unbelievable. We couldn't believe it because if you looked at the door, it was shredded. Matter of fact, one of the guys was sleeping, and a piece of shrapnel landed on his bed, and that kind of whoa. And my guys were like, okay, now it's real. It's wow. It wakes you up.
Yeah, it does. Were you still with the 3rd Armored Division, or were you with
No,
the...
no, no. I was with the 308th Quartermaster Company at that time. Once I went to reserves and we changed over to quartermaster, I was a fuel sergeant, platoon sergeant. And so I was with the 308th Quartermaster out of Washington, Iowa, and Mount Pleasant, Iowa.
Goodness. So how many people are you serving with at that point?
Our company had roughly around 120, 125, sometimes up to 130. Uh, during the tour, you lose some people. Not to, you could have, but people go home for certain reasons. So it fluctuated from 120 to 130.
Okay, and what year are we up to at this point? And how many years?
2004.
Okay, 2004, and you've been in now since
Uh,
1987?
I've been in reserve since 91.
Mm.
So I can't
Yeah,
think
I
of
can't do that math.
no, off the top of my head. I can't remember how much time I had in at that time,
Well,
but it was a good amount. It was like 15, 20 years, something like that. I was kind of up there.
so was that it for you after you serve in Iraq? Which how long were you there for? Do you remember?
We were there for a full year. Uh, Total deployment with because you got to remember before deployment you go to a uh, stateside base to train up for your deployment. So we were at where was it? Fort Bliss? No, Fort Riley. Fort Riley. Fort Riley the first time I went, and we were there for about a month, month and a half, and we were training up there. Then we go over to Iraq and we stay there for a full year, which is pretty bad for me because my daughter was born 2 weeks before we deployed to Iraq. So I got to see her for a couple days before we deployed.
And then not until she was a year old.
I come back about when she was a year old, and yeah, and then and of course we PCS, which is a permanent change of station. Me and my family PCS to Idaho, and we were part of the 1016th Quartermaster Company there. So, and as soon as I showed up, oh, guess what? The unit's getting deployed.
No.
And now I could have taken I didn't have to go because I just come back. But in my head, God put me there for a reason. And the Army sent me there for a reason. So my mentality at the time was, all right, time to go back again. So did the same thing. We trained for a month at this time we were at Fort Bliss, and we trained there for a month, and then we got sent overseas. And so at that point, I probably have seen my daughter for maybe 7 months, 8 months tops.
Yeah, and she would be over 2 then?
Yeah. By the time we deployed, she was just under 2. She turned 2 while I was over.
Okay. Well, it had been so hard on her and you and your wife.
Oh yeah, it was miserable for them, especially my wife. I didn't get to see any of the first. Diapers, walks, words, and my wife did a really awesome job. She kept on plugging into my daughter, Daddy, and she would record every day until she said the word daddy, and then she recorded it and sent it to me.
Oh my gosh, you had to just been like crying.
I was pretty emotional. It was she did a great job. She kept me, sane, I guess you could say, especially that first rotation. The first rotation was so stressful because of all the mortars and, people getting injured and stuff. Thank God it wasn't our unit, but unfortunately it was somebody else that we lost. I think that at that point in 2004, 10 to 15 people died at log base sites, and I can't remember how many injured. Fortunately, it wasn't anybody from our company.
Yeah. Yeah. Was your wife was back, you were at Fort Bliss that time, or you were in Idaho? You just did training in Fort Bliss, and she was based.
Oh, yeah. When I was at Fort Bliss, she was at home in Idaho, Pocatello, Idaho. That's where she was at, and she had to take care of the bills, take care of the kids, take care of everything. Her plate was full.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's not an easy job being a spouse of a soldier.
No, that's what I was going to say. We have so much respect and admiration for military families, and they're serving at the same time you are in a different way. And
absolutely.
Yeah. Did she have support from other military spouses?
Oh, absolutely. There was the FRG, which is the Family Readiness Group, and the FRG, wives stick together, and husbands, because we were quartermasters, so there was husbands too, and they had to stick together. When one was down, they had to come together and help out.
Yeah, but still, that's a lot of pressure on her.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Where did you do that second deployment?
Well, we were Toledo, and we were at what's called Cedar 2. That's where there was a small little base, but it was a lot better than log base sites. We didn't get hammered as much. Once in a while we got hammered, but I spent more. See, the first, second deployment, I guess you could say, OIF2, I spent most of my time on FOB or a little bit of time off. This time we were transportation, so we were on the road constantly. My first 6 months, they put me with an Iraqi unit and had us train them to be truck drivers. So we were on the road from Baghdad to Scania to Numaniyat to all over the country. But our job was to train up the Iraqi army to be truck drivers, which was it was interesting. Let me tell you. The second half of my deployment with the 1016th, I was a truck driver in a HET, heavy equipment transport trailer. And it was like one of those biggest trucks that the Army has, 40 wheels on the trailer. And our job was to haul tanks. So we on the road constantly. Every week we were on the road. There were maybe like a day or two that you had downtime. Otherwise, guess what? You're on the road.
Yeah. Well, when you're on the road, you have a lot of time to think. That's the unfortunate part.
You don't try to think as much as possible, because what you're doing is you have to focus on the road ahead and the road on the side, because there was IEDs everywhere. So, and not just IEDs, but ambushes, small arms fire, you name it, it could happen. So sorry, one of my dogs. You thought about only that what can happen next. You stayed alert, stayed alive. You looked at the road, you looked at a mile ahead, you looked, anything that looked out of the ordinary, you reported it. And so you were on edge the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, and that can be easy to go from like high adrenaline back low. You can yell at them if you need to.
Yep.
But your dogs, I mean.
Oh, yeah.
Who knows?
You can edit that out.
Yeah, could be a mailman, could be anything.
Yeah.
But was this after your second deployment? Was that when you retired? You were done?
Say again?
After you went to Iraq the second time, is that when you retired? Were you done at that point?
No, I came back home in 2007. We came back, so I was there from 2004 to 2005, and then 2006 to 2007. when we come back, I went ahead and we PCS pretty close to when we got back. I PCS to drill sergeant unit in Edison, New Jersey, and so I served there for about a year or two, and then I said, you know what, my body was starting to fall apart, my mentality was starting to fall apart. I put in my retirement, and they said you can go anywhere you want for your last duty station until you retire. So we went PCS again from Jersey to Idaho because we loved Idaho. We absolutely fell in love with the place.
I was going to
And
say
so,
anywhere you want, and you chose Idaho.
yep,
Shout out to Idaho.
yeah. Well, it was, when we got there, we fell in love with the mountains, the weather, the people were awesome. So we wanted to finish up our tour, my Army career in Idaho.
Okay. Well, hey, wherever you find that sense of community, that's where you should be. So, okay. Well, when you did retire, I mean, did you feel ready? This is a long time. This is
My body was ready. I wasn't mentally ready because I loved the Army. And first and foremost, you can ask my wife, ask anybody. I lived and breathed Army. That was my life, and I became Army family, whatever else after that, which my wife hates me when I say that, but it's true because I absolutely loved serving. I absolutely loved training with people, other soldiers, the lifestyle. It's a hard life, but it was everything. It was, like I said, it was my life. I loved the Army. So I was ready physically because my body was falling apart. I could tell I couldn't keep up with the troops. One of the last road marches I did with the guys in Idaho, my back, when I got home, my back was so bad I couldn't move. I couldn't get up. It was just miserable. But the whole time I did the ruck march, I didn't show anything because I didn't want these guys to know I was in severe pain.
Well, that seems to be a common theme. We were trying to stay strong for everybody else.
That's true. My deployments, I put my troops ahead of me. I put my family ahead of me. I put the Army ahead of me. And that's the way my whole career I did. And that's one of the reasons why when I retired, I felt so hard.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. I know this is it's probably hard to talk about, but I know a little bit about your story already. And so I know that it sort of all culminated after a while where it was, you weren't probably as busy or as active as you had been. I mean, in the way that you're not in a war zone anymore, or that you're constantly moving around. But that's not Wrigley, is it?
No, that was my other dog.
Okay. I knew it wasn't her. But you're, you have all this downtime now in some regard. I mean, you're also a dad of a young daughter, so I'm sure you're still keeping busy, but I know that the mental strain at that point was really tough. So talk to me just about that time period and what was.
So when I retired, I got a job as a civilian. I was a security guard at a location here in Burlington. We moved back to Burlington, by the way, Burlington, Iowa. And I found a civilian job, security job, and it was an easy cake job. It wasn't that hard. But for 2 years, I was there, and everything that happened to me in combat hit me. And in 2018, I had a mental breakdown. This is when the bad time for me was. I didn't have the Army to fall back on. I wouldn't talk to nobody. I isolated. I kept all the pain that I was suffering into myself. Sometimes it did show when I was at work. I would have panic attacks, anxiety attacks, but I didn't realize that's what they were. I didn't know what was going on mentally with me, not just physically now, mentally. And then 2018, I had made up my mind. I knew I was I didn't have anything to live for, and which is wrong. I mean, I had my family, I had a job and stuff like that. Uh, but that was it. It was done. Just like a lot of soldiers out there that commit suicide, uh, I was like a day away. I was one day. I had a plan. I knew what I was going to do, and um, my wife and one of my friends caught me, and they recognized the signs that I was done. And if they didn't do something, I wouldn't be here right now talking to you. So I thank those guys. My wife, I swear she's a saint. The stuff that she had to put up with and deal with. And so I thank every day for her and my friends, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be talking to you. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for them. And it's a struggle every day to keep that going for me. But yeah. And so what happened was, sorry about that. What happened was they caught me and they took me to Iowa City VA. And that's where I stayed for 6 months, 4 to 6 months.
Just trying to heal, recover
Yes.
your mind into a better spot.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry. It just like choked me up because your wife is amazing
Yes.
and has been such a support for you and your friend. And I think
Oh, yeah.
it takes vulnerability on both sides to, for you to be going through that openly and then for them to recognize it and be able to help.
It was worse than the deployments because I was falling apart. The VA was trying to figure out how to fix me. They were trying different medications. They were trying therapies. They tried, what is it called? Electric. Oh, it's basically they send a shockwave through you to reset your body. They tried everything with me, and I was just not coming out of it. And my wife was struggling, because on a deployment, you got all your family and friends, and, you got all kinds of support chains. And this is what goes on a lot of times with soldiers afterwards. They don't have that support chain anymore from the Army. They just have their family. And, the Army didn't realize what they had when all this stuff, people started actually getting time, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
The support chain from the Army wasn't there. And the VA wasn't ready for as many people to come in and be like this. So it was new to them, new to everybody. We were doing 22 a day. And, I was close to being one of those. And it was hard. And my wife and family went through hell. They literally went through hell because I was in Iowa City in the psych ward, and it looked like I wasn't coming out anytime soon.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, and you went through hell too.
Yeah, but again, I don't like. I was yes, I was in my own personal hell, but I swear my family had it worse because they had to worry about themselves, and they didn't have my paycheck anymore from my civilian job, so they were going through literally hell, worse than I was going through.
I'm sorry that you experienced that and that they experienced that, but I think it says a lot about you, Ty, that you have a family and a network that loved you so much that all they wanted was for you to be well and to see you at your lowest and be like, it doesn't matter. Like, this is somebody we love.
And at the time, you don't see that. Right before you actually go through it, you don't see all the support chains you do have. You don't look for them. You don't ask for them. You don't do anything. All you're thinking about is ending the pain. And that's what I wanted to do. I just wanted the pain to be over. And I just wanted to, just end it and just call it good. I did everything I ever wanted to do. So let's go ahead and just call it quits.
Well, I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad that.
Same here.
Yeah. And you had mentioned there the VA, was ill prepared for really the result of war, right? Like we're like,
Yeah.
okay, this is done. We can't just go back home and turn all this off, and maybe weren't quite prepared for the influx of care needs that they were going to be. Did you know anybody else personally from your units that was struggling that was able to find help too? And
Couple people. There was right at the end of deployment. There was a couple people. I won't mention names or anything like that, but they were having a hard time, and none of us really knew. We sent them to. There was something that's called it's on post help. They had psychiatrists and psychologists on post overseas to help with that. So we sent into that. But when I was back here, and I'll tell you a quick story. When I first came back in '91, I went to the VA because I was drinking a lot. I was having mental issues, and I was just until I found the reserves, I was not in a good place. But the VA, when they said, it's all in your head. Well, yeah, it's all in my head, but what are you going to do about it?
You're like, I'm in my head.
Yeah, they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't help me at all. They made it feel like it was your fault. It's in your head, so blah. So when I retired, and it was so new, all the suicides, the VA had to take a time and say, look, we do have a problem here. There is a systemic problem with people when they get home, especially with Army Reserve soldiers, because on active duty, when you retire or when you get out of combat, you're going to a base, and that base has help. They have psychiatrists, they have hospitals, they have help for you. As a reservist, you go back to your home, you go back to your civilian life, and you try to pick up where you left off, which is really hard to do after you've been in combat. You just can't pick up your old life and go back to work and back to normal. It's just not there because, it's almost like the Army doesn't care. At the time they were like, all right, you did your job. Thanks. Bye. Have a good life. And that's how they treated the Army Reservists, especially if they got out of the Army Reserves. Yeah, it wasn't good. But the Army saw it and the VA saw the systemic problem of what I just said. They saw that they need to do something because otherwise this is going to go crazy. And it did. For a couple years until they figured it out, they were having a hard time.
Yeah, it's like you've changed and everybody around you, or everything around you is the same. And you're like,
Yes.
I can just come back in here into this on a Monday morning. And I'm all of a sudden I'm back in my old life, quote unquote.
See, I was fortunate. My career, when I went back on active duty AGR, I had the Army. And, my job was the Army. So I was good. But when I retired, I didn't have that support chain anymore. That's when it blew up in my head. And it's just like those reservists. When they come home, they don't have their buddies with them next to them. A lot of the time, they're in different states. They get separated. They go back to their old units, and they're all over. Like let's say the 308th Quartermaster was in Washington and Mount Pleasant, right? We had people from Minnesota. We had people from Kansas. We had people from Missouri. So, and we were in Southeast Iowa, so we had people from Des Moines, Western Iowa, things like that. So when we came home, we spent 2 weeks in Fort Riley, and my mouth is my throat's getting dry.
Yeah, chug some water. I know that's the worst, and you can't get past it.
So, you're at a base for 2 weeks. Now, at that base, you can tell them all the problems you have. But if you tell them that you have problems, guess what? They keep you on base for another 6 months to a year. Well, a lot of reservists, they wanted to go home. So they kept all that stuff inside. They told everybody, we're fine. We're good to go. And so then they took off. They got home, but they weren't fine. They weren't ready. And so that's when the problem happened.
Yeah. Well, and you said, like, to your point, you tried a little bit of everything. You know, they were throwing everything to see how do we make this better. And I think from your perspective, it seems like your service dog, Wrigley, was like a huge help for you. But we'll get back to her, I promise. But what do you think they could do better, like to better support now that you're on the other end of it?
I think that, make it mandatory after deployments that you stay not 2 weeks, but you stay a month and reinforce that, look, if you need help, let's do it now. Yeah, you're going to be stuck on base for a little bit longer, but look, we're going to take care of you. We're going to make sure you're ready to go back to civilian life. The active duty, they have a good plan. Like when you retire from active duty, you go through ACAP, or I think that's what it's called, but you go through a program to try to help you transition from military life to civilian life. They don't have nothing like that in the Army Reserve or National Guard. As far as I know, they don't have a transition to help you get out or get back to your unit. So I don't think they have. Could be wrong, but as far as I know, they don't have anything, and that's the problem. And that's what we need to reinforce. Look, you're not broken. You just need help, and we can help you. And just knowing that they care and that they're going to help you means a lot.
Yeah, it means everything. I mean, you've given so much. You gave almost 3 decades of your life. So I think, yeah, you deserve all the support you can get. And tell us about Wrigley, how you got her and how that resource helped you.
Well, one of the resources the VA had was they sent me to St. Cloud, Minnesota. And I stayed about a month or two up there. And while I was there, I was, I'm sorry. I was trying to figure out who I am and what do I need to do. Well, I went to church one day, and that kind of turned me around. But then also that somebody said, hey, maybe you should get a service dog too. I was like, service dog? Vets will tell you they don't need help, don't want help. And if you tell them that you deserve help, they're going to go, no, somebody else out there needs it more than I do. Forget it. You give it to them. Just about every troop will tell you that. And I was that way too. It's like, give it to somebody else that needs it. So, but I got home and my wife was like, you really need to try it. See what they got out there and see what programs you have and what's available. Well, the first place that came up when I did a Google search was Retrieving Freedom. Oh, sorry, my voice is going.
You're good. You can take a second. I'm going to take a sip of water too.
Oh, okay. So
we're almost there.
I went on. What's that?
I said we're almost there. Hang in with her a little longer.
All right. So Retrieving Freedom. I Googled it and found it, and I was like, what the heck, I'll try it. I went up there and did an interview with them. They explained everything, and I was like, all right, I filled out the application, and I was approved. So I had something to look forward to. So I kept on. The training part was like 100 hours of training, which I think they've reduced that now, thank God. But you have to do 100 hours of training to get your service dog. And it's not so much for the dog, it's for you to learn how to handle your dog, to handle what they do, what they can do, and, how they act. How to take care of your dog, how to make sure that they get the proper meals and things like that. So it was really an in-depth program. And a lot of the programs I saw out there was, okay, we're just going to give you a dog. There you go. And then that's it. Retrieving Freedom doesn't do that. They make sure you are ready, and they make sure those dogs are ready. The dogs that they have are amazing. The things that they can do, Wrigley is like unbelievable. She picks up my phone. She picks up my cane when I drop it. Whatever I drop on the floor, she'll pick up for me if I tell her. She opens doors, handicap doors for me. I mean, and plus, the biggest thing is her ability to tell when I'm having the problem, when I'm having anxiety, or I'm sad or depressed. She knows that, and she comes up to me, and if we're out and about, she puts her head on my lap. If we're home, she comes over here to my chair, lays next to me, and puts her head on my lap. But she knows. I mean, these dogs are amazing. That the training they go through, and I can't say enough. Retrieving Freedom helped save my life because that was one of the things. Wrigley. I don't go anywhere without Wrigley, and trust me, my wife doesn't like that either. Because we go out and about, it's me, her, and Wrigley.
Third wheel.
It really does help. When we go out and about, she blocks when people get behind me, because a lot of vets, they don't like people getting up next to them, right next to them, and behind them or in front of them. So I tell Wrigley, I'll say behind, and she'll get behind me and block. Or I'll tell her to come front, and she'll block up front. And so Retrieving Freedom, I can't say enough. That's one of the things I do now. I help Retrieving Freedom because they're a tax-free organization or something like that. I don't know what to call it, but they run off of donations because the dogs they provide are free to autistic children and veterans. They don't charge a dime. The only thing you have to pay for is your way up to get there. That's the only thing you pay for. So their service is unbelievable. These dogs are like $35,000, $40,000 by the time you get them, with all their training, food, medical, this and that. So yeah, they're expensive. Yeah. But the Retrieving Freedom doesn't charge a dime. You get that dog free of charge. And when the dog retires, they will provide you another dog.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. When Wrigley gets up in age and she can't do the job anymore, they will medically retire her, and she'll be just our pet. She becomes just a member of the household. And then Retrieving Freedom will provide you another dog. So you got to go not as in depth when you get another dog, but you still have to go through the program again. But that's what they do. That's what they provide. And I can't even think about her medically retiring, but at some point I will have to, if she can't do the job, she's going to have to just take it easy from then on.
Oh, I believe in Wrigley. She's got a lot of years ahead of her.
Yeah. She'll be 7 in October. So, yeah, she's still got a lot of life in her, and I'm not letting Nathan happen to her.
No, I was just thinking your poor wife. Now you're going to have 2 dogs going out to dinner.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Now, one of the things that I didn't mention was now the VA recognizes how important service dogs are. And if you have a certified service dog, they provide insurance for your dog. So it's free of charge. They don't charge veteran nothing. So Wrigley gets all her shots. If something happens to her, it's all covered and no charge to the veteran.
Wow.
So that's one thing VA has done right, is they recognize service dogs as being important.
Good. They are. They're life-saving and life-changing.
Yep. They are.
And I think that's kind of my last question for you is you've experienced a lot. You've been through a lot. And like we said, the pre 9/11 Desert Storm, post 9/11 wars, all of it in between, active duty and then reserve. I think if there is somebody that's listening to this, because I know that's why you agreed to do it, is you're
Yep.
just like so many other veterans, you're like, if it helps one other person, I'll share my story. What advice would you give to somebody who might be going through something similar, is not sure where to begin or what to do, and might need a little help? What would you suggest they do?
First thing is, you're not alone. You are not alone. There are people out there that will help. There are a lot of people out there that all they want to do is help. So you're not alone. Second thing is research. And what I mean by research is like look for a service dog organization, look for a good therapist, psychologist, and harp on the VA. Do not let them sit on their butts. You make the VA work for you. That is matter of fact, that should be the first thing is that you're not alone. Second thing is put the VA and its resources to work. And now I'm proud to say the VA does a lot better. They're not perfect yet, but they do a heck of a job. And I can't thank them enough for what they've done for me. So that's a big thing right there. But like I said, you're not alone. Put the VA to work and research. And, stay busy, get out there, because nobody's going to take care of you except you. All right. They'll help you, and you'll have the tools to do it, but you got to do the work.
It's a powerful message, Ty, and you're still leading from the front, just like you were all those years. You're welcome. I just, on behalf of all of us, a Mission Roll Call, I just thank you for being so willing and open to share your story. And I think, like we've talked about, it will touch a lot of people's lives, and that I think people will feel really impacted by what you shared. And I just appreciate you sharing it to hopefully reach more veterans and their families. So thank you so much for being part of this.
This is kind of what, not just helping retrieving freedom, but also this helps me. Because before, like I said, I was isolating. Mm-hmm. So going out and doing podcasts, talking to people, going to different events and stuff like that is part of my therapy. So it's one of the tools that I use.
Well, thank you, Ty. I appreciate you putting it to work and to continue paying it forward. And for our listeners who might not know, we do have Ty's written story on our website, our brand new website at missionrollcall.org, which you can check out there. And be sure to come back for another episode of the Lasting Mission podcast. And thank you, Ty.
Oh, not a problem. Anytime.